Since April is Autism Awareness Month, I took some time to sit down with Tika Hartsock to discuss special education and how schools work with students with disabilities. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Milan and I'm here with Special Education Coordinator Tika Hartsock. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Milan. I'm doing well today. It's relatively warm outside, so that was a little bit of a shocker compared to the weather that we've been having. But thank you again for having me, because autism is something that's near and dear to my heart.
Yes. Okay. Can you share an experience in the field of special education and what led you to pursue this career?
Sure. So special education and teaching in general was a career switch for me. So originally, I went to school for political science and got a bachelor's degree in political science and thought I was going to be an attorney until I participated in an AmeriCorps program called Public Allies, which was fantastic. That's a little plug for anyone to check it out. But then after that, I started working in youth development and I went back to school for public policy while I continued to work with youth. And then I decided that I wanted to be a teacher and that I really enjoy providing instruction for students around content areas as well as just other youth development areas. So I went back to school. I earned another degree in education. And during that time, I had some experience substitute teaching for the Delaware Autism Program. And I fell in love with working with students with autism. And so I also, at that time, went and got my certification for working with special education. It also became something near and dear to my heart as I then gained employment myself within the Delaware Autism Program as a specialized special education instructor for them, working with some early education students as well as kindergarten students. And it was an area that was near and dear to my heart because I also have a son who's diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So that's sort of what led me a little bit in that direction and kind of kept me there.
Okay. Um, how do you plan to advocate for the needs of students with disabilities and ensure their success?
So advocating is something that I've done in my day-to-day role as a teacher within the building and then as a special education coordinator. But beyond that, I also serve on several councils throughout the state that work on policy for individuals with disabilities, particularly children. I also meet with families. I used to be the former director for the board of Parent Information Center. So anytime that families have an educational dispute in regards to special education services, or they feel that the child should have access to services that they may not have access to yet, that's an organization that can help assist with any of their needs as well. So I direct families there. I also, actually, this weekend coming up, I'm a keynote speaker for a family leadership academy that helps families learn how to advocate for their children more. And then even within my building, as being a parent myself of a child with a disability, I often try and bridge the gap between educators and families and sharing some of my own personal experience that is also my professional experience.
Nice. Okay. What personal values or beliefs guide your work in the field of special education?
Well, one of my biggest beliefs is in inclusion, and I'm a firm believer that everybody should be included of varying abilities, even in regards to race and religion and all of the other areas as well. But inclusion is very important for me, not only for the individual with disabilities, but also for people that don't have disabilities, because the world is made up of all different types of people. And so I think the more that we learn about each other, the more that we can be accepting of each other's differences.
Okay. How do you ensure that your work is student centered and focused on the individual needs of each student?
So, within my day to day job as a special education coordinator, my role is to work with our classroom teachers, our special education teachers, as well as our specialists, such as occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, uh, board certified behavior analysts. And so each of these individuals comes with their own perspective. And so, really kind of getting them all together to create this programming that's best for the students and what they need. And then also reminding them that, why they have their own perspective on what they may feel is the best support or the need, that at the end of the day, we're also there for the child. And we need to do what's best for the child and not necessarily what's sometimes convenient for the adults or for the school district as well.
How do you ensure that the individual needs of students with a wide range of disabilities are met with your school or district?
So, some ways that we work to address that is by holding IEP meetings, which an IEP is an individual education program. Sometimes people think the P stands for plan because they're plans that people put together, but it's actually a program, and so it encompasses what the students' needs are, any identified supports and services they may have, where they're receiving those services, the accommodations and any modifications they may be receiving. And we really kind of focus on that to create the plan for the student. Okay, so and then additionally, how I ensure that their needs are met is by we hold annual IEP meetings. So every student that has been identified as a student with a disability has an annual IEP meeting to once they've been found eligible to review their progress to identify any new need areas. Every 3 years, the students have what's called a triennial, and that's where the school team will complete new round of evaluations to determine if the student still meets the criteria of one of the 13 disability classifications in Delaware, and autism is one of those 13. And then that's how we sort of ensure that we're continuing to meet their needs, as well as each marking period, there's a benchmark associated with it where each of the identified goals, the specialist and the teachers report out on their progress on those goals. And then if a student is not making progress on those goals after two marking periods in a row, then we like to reconvene as a team and kind of discuss, what ways can we modify what we're providing or accommodations, or maybe we need to increase supports, but really looking at how we can help that student be successful.
Okay. How do you handle disagreements or conflicts between parents and school staff regarding the education of a student with special needs?
Oh man, that's a touchy one. So, special education or just parents of students with disabilities can often feel like they're having to fight for different services for their students. Some schools are better at collaborating than some others, and there's some places where we still have to bring people more up to speed on what some rights are. But beyond that, when families do have disagreements within the school, they can request to have an IEP meeting called themselves. They can request to meet with myself. If we do have an IEP meeting, I like to prep first with the school and let them know what are some of the concerns of the family that we would be addressing. But then I also like to meet with the parents separate and really hear what are their concerns, what are, maybe some gaps in services that we're not providing, and then get us all together. And instead of kind of focusing on where we disagree, we like to focus on what the issues are and just kind of keep it focused to the issues, not necessarily, making it personalized to whatever someone's issue they have with one person or another person, but really keeping it focused on the student and how we can resolve the issue or the conflict for the best need of the student.
Okay. How do you ensure that students with special needs receive appropriate assessments and evaluations?
Sure. So, with our earliest youngers, and this includes students out in the community, there's something called Child Find. So, if, say, right across the street from here, there's a covenant, and say that there's a 3 or 4 year old preschooler over there that maybe they have delayed speech and they're not speaking, and the family maybe has some other cognitive concerns. They complete a questionnaire called the Ages and Stages questionnaire. Pediatricians also provide the same questionnaire as well as our school district preschools. And that really looks at different milestones that our early youngers really should be meeting and if there are any delays or concerns. At that point, it then would get put onto someone like myself's radar. I would issue something called a permission to evaluate after speaking with the family and getting their permission to do developmental full evaluation. And that would include looking at areas such as speech and language, fine motor, gross motor, any social emotional needs that the child might have. And so we would look at that. Once that permission to evaluate is returned, the school district then has 45 school days or 90 calendar days to complete an evaluation. And once we're done that evaluation, we would then bring all the evaluators back as well as the parent to discuss the results of the evaluation. If it is something where the student meets the criteria of one of the 13 disability classifications, then we would look to go ahead and provide an IEP and probably propose what would be called an initial IEP at that meeting as well. For students that are older than 3 and 4 year olds, they usually get identified. So, like kindergarten through 12th grade would probably get identified through what's called the MTSS process. And that's our multi tiered process where formerly we used to call it RTI, or response to intervention. But students move through 3 tiers, and there's two sides of it. There's an academic side, looking at how the student is doing with their academics, as well as then there's a social emotional side. If are there any other needs? Is that child developing appropriate social skills and emotional regulation skills? Are there perhaps any sensory differences that may also be affecting the needs? But then the same process would sort of play out from the MTSS process. That would then generate that would then generate a permission to evaluate that the parent would need to sign, and then we would move forward the full evaluation. And then another thing that happens sometimes is that families, if they just have their own concerns with how their child is being able to perform academically and even their intellectual functioning, they can also request an evaluation from the school district as well.
Okay. How do you stay updated on best practices and developments in the field of special education?
Sure. So, as a special education coordinator within my district, we have our own in-house trainings on various topics that is put together and outlined by our student services department, or I'm sorry, our special services department. And then, in addition to that, there's trainings that have been identified from the state that I participate in. And then, in addition to that, there's also different advocacy groups that I'm a part of, or special education groups that I'm a part of, such as the state Special Education Strategic Advisory Planning Council. Um, and so, through those avenues, I can stay abreast of best practices or things coming on. I also attend conferences that are regionally as well as local and nationally.
Okay, thank you so much, and that is all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing some knowledge about what you do. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, well, it's been great being here. Thanks for having me, Milan, and being able to speak about autism and special education services for other students with disabilities. And I think you have my contact information if there's anyone else who has any further any further questions about working with students with disabilities, or any families that need any support with their students with disabilities. Feel free to reach out, and I can certainly try and help them, or at least connect them to the right place.
Okay.